I want to take a few moments to share with you a bit about my dad's journey over the past 11 months and some valuable lessons we can all take from it. When you hear about a cancer diagnosis, immediately your heart sinks. Your brain is thrusted into thinking about death in a way that you've never thought about it before. It's in your face, front and center. At first, when we found out that Dad had cancer, you tend to want to look backwards. If only he had gone to his preventative doctor's appointments. If only he had gone to the doctor when he started noticing something wasn't right within his body. This did not have to be this way. He wouldn't have to fight this type of battle if only. We wouldn't be feeling this way if only. But looking backwards doesn't do much of anything except fill you with regret. It leaves you longing for changes you can't go back and make. Looking back will paralyze you and render you useless. My dad, my mom, my two brothers, Tony and Eric, and myself decided right away that we would not start this journey by looking back. We were only looking forward. My dad and I often talked about anxiety. It's something he never understood, but in 2011, my life changed radically because I had experienced my first panic attack. It was the scariest thing I had ever experienced. I didn't know what a panic attack was, so I assumed I was just dying. Until I went to the doctor and they found out that nothing was wrong with me, which made me even more anxious because what I had experienced wasn't nothing. It was very much something. Death is what it was. Call it what you want, I call it death, except you're trapped alive while you're dying. For 365 days, I was stuck in a loop of anxiety and panic, and come to find out, the panic attack had scared me so bad I was constantly fearing another one. So the anxiety loop kept me caught in a destructive cycle of fear. After a year of battling, I found my way out, and I realized that when fear is staring us in the face, we want to resist it. We tense up. We run the other direction. We do everything we can to avoid that discomfort. But I learned through those 365 awful days, you cannot run from you. I remember one day, my husband and I were house sitting for my in-laws while they were out of town, and I drove home to get our pillows. I was in our apartment alone. This dense cloud of fear came over me, and I started running through the apartment to get our pillows and get the hell out of there. I grabbed the pillows off of our bed and I ran down the hallway to the living room, stopped in the living room, threw the pillows to the floor, and I fell to my knees and wept. What am I running from? I asked myself in desperation. Where are you going? This fear is in you, not outside of you. You cannot escape it by running. That day, I lay prostrate with my face to the floor, and I did the most terrifying thing. I chose to sit with the fear. I chose to let the feelings of anxiety freely move through my body. If it killed me, it killed me. It was the most terrifying experience, but I resolved I would not run anymore. My fingers tingled, my toes went numb, and the sickness in my stomach was overwhelming. The panting of my breath was scary, but even so, I chose to let it happen. Let the waves of fear rush over me. After the intensity of those feelings subsided, I laid on the floor a little while longer, and I felt beat up and tired, but no longer afraid. I realized that day that the freedom we so desperately seek is on the other side of what we fear most. It's not about running away. It's about leaning in. I learned that sometimes anxiety is a warning, but oftentimes anxiety is an invitation. It calls out to us and it invites us to go deeper. It wants us to shake off the things that we've attached to our identity that causes us to live our lives a lie. It's asking us to stop betraying ourselves. It's an invitation for abundance, clarity, restoration, fulfillment. It's asking us to peel off the outer layer and step into the fullness of who we really are. In 2017, I wrote a book about that experience called Pressing Forward, Pushing Through Fear and Anxiety to Find My Truest Self. In a nutshell, the book basically says, lean in. As I said, my dad never understood anxiety. He would say, sorry, Pastor, why worry about shit you can't control, girl? I just don't get it. No matter how much I tried to explain, he could not grasp what I was talking about. My dad lived with a lean-in mentality, so maybe that's why he didn't experience or get anxiety. He didn't resist when he faced challenges. He grew up in a generation where you just plow through. He told me a story once when he was a boy, He said there was this brick wall, and I told my mama, I'm gonna run through that brick wall. And her response was, "You better not, I'm gonna whip your ass." A few things that I said here. First of all, tells you about my dad. Who was walking around wanting to run through brick walls? I'm so glad we have iPads and iPhones for our children these days. Second, he was confident about being able to run through it. He was determined that he could run through it. He believed he could. Third, his mother didn't stop to tell him that the wall was made of brick and mortar. And she didn't explain to him that his flesh and bone, regardless of how strong he was, would most likely be no match for that brick wall. Instead, she told him, "You better not, I'll whip your ass." My dad had no sense of "I can't." He didn't run through that wall not because he believed he couldn't, but because he didn't want to get his tail beat by his mom. And that's how he was raised. That was his mindset. You just do what you gotta do. Get into motion, take action, and get to work. My dad worked with his hands his whole life, but he lived in his head. Plowing through mental brick walls that make most of us stumble, he busted right through them. Throughout these past 11 months, I have referenced lean in more times than I can count, because that's what these 11 months were. Head first, leaning in, letting fear move through, no resisting, no white knuckling. You can't grip what's fleeting, no matter how hard you try. And even if you brace for impact, the impact keeps coming. Living your life constantly in a state of tension is no way to live your life at all. Throughout the journey of 11 months, I saw my dad soften. Being a daddy's girl, I always saw a piece of him that was a little more tender than most. I'm the only girl, middle child. Some call me stubborn like my daddy. I just say I'm strong-willed, just like my daddy said about himself. I was in trouble a lot growing up, not because I was bad though, but because I was misunderstood. And when I was 17 years old, I got in trouble again. And my dad was so fed up with me, but instead of taking his "you do what I say" approach, I am my father's daughter, and if you take that approach with me, it does not work out very well. He sat me down and he said to me, "If you were your child, what would you do with you?" And with tears in my eyes, I looked deeply into his and I said, I would listen to her. I would stop talking at her. I would listen to what she thinks. And our relationship changed for the better that day. And my dad softened towards me, and I softened towards him. And we found a middle ground where both of our voices could be heard. For the first time in my teen years, we were both leaning in toward each other. We realized that opinions are opinions. Go figure. And this doesn't mean someone is right or wrong. Go figure. We realized that I would be responsible for the choices that I made, good or bad. Those outcomes would be mine. And we realized that just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean you have to hate them. And we realized that oftentimes neither of us understood the other, and that was okay, because you don't have to understand in order to love someone. And sometimes if you love someone, you're actually a little more open to understanding. Because if you stop saying what you so strongly disagree with, you might find yourself cracking open to new ideas and concepts and ways of life. Like iced coffee, for instance. My dad never understood iced coffee. Why in the hell would you put ice in coffee? You drink it black in the morning and then you move on, he'd say. And I'd say, or you can drink it with ice, you can drink it frosted, you can drink it with foam or cold foam. You can have it in the morning or midday or afternoon. Yes, you can drink it black. Do that if it's your preference. But until you've tasted an iced coffee with caramel syrup and almond milk on a hot summer day, don't you tell me you don't understand. Try it first. You don't have to understand it, but you at least have to try it. I tried it once, wasn't my thing, didn't understand. Not, I just don't understand. You have to try to understand. You haven't tried to understand. When my dad was going through chemo, I'd meet him for chemo Wednesday, and we would sit together during infusion, just him and me, and we'd meet my mom for lunch after. And one day during chemo, my dad turned to me and said with a smirk on his face, "I tried iced coffee." "What?" I said in shock. "Well, did you like it?" I asked him, and he smiled and nodded. It was pretty damn good. Seek first to understand, my friends. Don't just dismiss what you don't understand. You could be missing out on some of the most wonderful experiences in life because you're not willing to try before you dismiss what doesn't resonate with you right off, like hobbies, or food, so many wonderful foods, or even on a deeper scale, you could be missing out on people from different lifestyles and cultures and backgrounds, different upbringings and mindsets, and most importantly, you would for sure miss out on iced coffee. Don't miss out on iced coffee because you don't understand. One area where I really found a lot of hope during my dad's journey was in regards to food. Chemo destroys the pleasure of food, apparently. My dad really didn't lose his appetite much, but during the past 11 months, his taste was not so lucky. He constantly struggled to find things to eat that tasted good to him. One day, he was telling me about how meat was disgusting. No flavor and just texture. And meat texture is no good with no flavor. Dad said to me, I'm going to be really pissed if I have to be a vegan, because that's not something I call cool. And then he goes, oh, bacon. Me, bacon? Him. He smiled, but bacon is still bacon. It tastes just the same. I want to encourage you, if for some reason you ever wind up in chemo, hopefully not, or you wind up having your taste buds burnt off, according to my dad, bacon is still bacon. And how glorious is that? In my dad's final few days on earth, we cherished and treasured our limited time with him. We were presented with a plethora of life lessons in a short amount of time. 2 days before my dad died, my older brother Tony came to the hospital to see him. When he came into the room, there was a lot going on with the nurse checking in and out and getting medications for my dad. And I watched Tony slowly fade into the corner of the room where he stood quietly and he watched from a distance. When the nurse had finished, my dad looked around and she spied Tony in the corner. Tony, get on over here, my dad said as he called Tony to him. Tony walked over to the bed and my dad reached out. Tony leaned in and they hugged. They hugged tightly, and I heard my dad say to Tony, I've always loved you, boy, although I never understood you. And Tony laughed and he said, same. My dad was not a guy who threw around, I love you. If he didn't mean it, he wouldn't say it. But he also assumed people knew he loved them, and therefore he didn't say it. We all needed to hear him say that, and we all got that opportunity. If you love people, you need to tell them. Don't let gaps in your relationships create a distance between the exchange of I love yous. And when you think of people you love, if you think about telling them right now I love you and that feels weird to you, fix it. Fix whatever that is, because there is a wedge. Also, look around your life for the people in the corners. Whether they were slowly pushed to a corner or they slowly backed themselves into that corner, you call them back. Let them know there is no reason for them to hide or shy away. And let them know that you see them and you want them near. And let them know that they are worthy to stand beside you, right next to you. Shame drives us to a corner. Guilt drives us to a corner. Fear that we're not fully accepted as who we are pushes us into a corner. All we ever really want to know is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you accept me? And do I matter? And if someone you love gravitates near the corner in your presence, draw them out quickly and let them know they belong next to you, regardless of your differences. Earlier I mentioned that my dad never understood anxiety. As his days were drawing near, my dad experienced his first panic attack. Think about it. You're already having a hard time breathing due to your lungs. One night, early morning, around 4 a.m., my dad had a coughing spell. These were quite common during the last few months. And as he was having a coughing spell, his oxygen dropped, then he had a bronchospasm, and then he had a panic attack, unbeknownst to him, and rightfully so. The nurse called my mom and said that my dad was scared and wanted her to come to the hospital, and in a matter of 15 minutes, she was by his side. When I got to the hospital later that day, it was just me and him in the room, and he told me about the experience that morning, and then he turned to me and he said, it was the scariest thing I have ever gone through. As he explained the details, I realized he had had a panic attack. He said, I've always been able to tell my brain, stop, calm down, you're okay. But this time, my brain was not listening. You see, in his previous hospital experience, while he was bedridden and nowhere to go, I brought my book to him, and I made him read it. It wasn't to help him. It was for my own selfish reasons. Hey, you got nothing better to do. Here's my book, read it. And he read it in a day. When I came to visit him the next day, he pulled the book from a drawer on his side table, and he handed it back to me. Here, I read it, he said. And I got all sappy as if he voluntarily read it on his own, and I didn't force it on him. Oh, you read my book? I was moved because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. He didn't have to read it, but he did. And he responded as he was handing it back. Yup, still don't get it, but I read it. And now here we were, a week later, and he fully understood. I mean, I guess I need to reference the fact that most people experience anxiety in cases such as, I don't think my boss likes me, anxiety. Am I going to get fired? Anxiety. I'm going to be late, anxiety. I'm worried about the thing that will probably never happen, anxiety. But my dad, literally staring death in the face, anxiety. Show off. Don't worry. As he shared his horrifying experience with me, I didn't pity him. Instead, I looked him in the face, and I folded my arms, and I went, well, 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 look who met anxiety. I'd say you understand it now. Yup, he grinned and nodded. Good thing you read my book, I said back to him. But in all seriousness, that type of anxiety and panic is nothing to laugh about because it is terrifying. I got to spend the next few minutes coaching him through anxiety and panic attacks, and I hope to help relieve that fear by explaining to him how it works because, well, and later that day, my dad was prescribed an anti-anxiety medication. The night was so daunting for him because he was afraid he would go through that terror again. He was very open about his fears, no tough guy act. And here's what I learned from that experience. I spent a year suffering through anxiety and panic in 2011. 9 years later, I was at my dad's bedside coaching him through anxiety and panic. You can't give what you don't have. I battled anxiety and it almost took me out, but I overcame it. And because of that horrible experience of my own, I was able to comfort and coach my dad 9 years later. The hardships that we experience are never void. Nothing is lost. We may not always understand why we're going through what we're going through, and I'm not saying we're going through it specifically to help other people later. No, sometimes we just go through hard things because that's life. And I don't believe just all things happen for a reason. I believe it's just part of being human, and we're having a human experience. Good experiences, bad experiences, you can label them what you want, or you can call them what they are, experiences. Each challenge and opportunity is offering us growth and expansion depending on your mindset. You can walk away with treasures and new tools in your toolbox. Our past hardships can be the ticket of hope that someone else needs while they're in the thick of their own hardship. Nothing is lost. No experience is ever void. A couple of hours before my dad passed away, my brothers, Tracy, my dad's boss and friend, and I were in the room talking with my dad. My dad, although he did have a morphine drip, he wasn't drugged. He actually seemed very normal considering the circumstances, and at one point during our conversation, I said something about how my dad should take an edible, medicinal, of course. But then I joked and said, never mind, you're already on the good stuff, morphine. And my dad's voice broke through and said, hell, I'm already seeing hummingbirds. And our eyes shifted towards him in the room. You seeing hummingbirds, I asked. Yeah, if you see me doing this, it's because they keep flying by my head. And then he carried on like that was completely normal, while the rest of us were just, what? Later, I looked up the symbolism of seeing hummingbirds. I like just kind of reading into that sometimes just to see. And here's what I found. When the hummingbird comes into your life, be ready to receive wisdom and insight. This bird enables you to connect with your inner being, and it delivers spiritual messages to guide you on how to go about a particular situation. Its move is unique in pattern. It brings to mind the concepts of infinity, continuity, and eternity. A close look at the hummingbird reveals that these birds do not tire easily. They will be busy looking for the sweetest nectar available in their environment. The hummingbird is in your life. It is a sign of love and happiness, and it appears as a miracle of life. Its presence wants you to know that the sweetest nectar is within your reach. More importantly, you can access this nectar from deep within you. Therein lies your most powerful resources. The bird is known to fly far and wide, and when it flies into your life, you get the ability to withstand challenging journeys with much joy. The hummingbird teaches you to be independent. It empowers you to cherish being in the present moment. People with the image learn quickly to enjoy life. They are not encumbered by the worries of the world. They know the value of life. The hummingbird encourages you to let life into your life. It is your companion. You will be able to fly from one place to the next with good cheer. And just like the hummingbird, you have the innate desire to be free. You are resilient and fierce, and you will travel without boundaries. It will open your eyes to the value of your loved ones. You are able to appreciate them more. You have the ability to adapt to whatever changes come your way. When you make contact with a hummingbird, know that the journey ahead of you will be lighter, and you will be equipped with the tools that you need for the journey. The hummingbird symbol is about perseverance and endurance. It empowers you to experience more love, more joy, and more happiness as you journey along. That is the magic of life. With this magic, your life becomes more fulfilling. And with time, you're able to achieve what others can only dream of. The hummingbird perches in your life to add value. It's showing that you are a messenger of jubilation and hope. Thus, you act as an inspiration to those who are watching you. Sometimes we get a beating from life and we lose our original focus. And this is where the hummingbird comes in and it helps you refocus. In this way, you become more productive in your endeavors. The hummingbird opens the gateway to true happiness and joy. It will appear in your life at just the right moment when you need it most. It is a symbol reminding you that joy is just around the corner. Stop waiting and go. Alternatively, the hummingbird meaning is letting you know that you can go anywhere you desire. The only obstacle in your way is yourself. I read this to my mom and brothers shortly after my dad passed. We were all stunned and yet filled with so much hope. I will never look at hummingbirds the same. I don't think any of us will. So if you see one on your journey, remember its meaning and find hope in any challenge that you may be facing, knowing that you're fully equipped and capable, and most likely, you're the only person standing in your way. Finally, I want to share with you a moment that will be staying on our hearts forever. When my dad started his transition, it lasted about an hour and 15 minutes, and then he was gone. Earlier in the day, we were talking to his palliative care PA. With Dad listening, the PA told us that because my dad wasn't expelling carbon dioxide properly, eventually he would start to get drowsy, and then sleepier and sleepier. As he drifted off into sleep without waking back up, the medical team would administer sedation medication, and once he was in complete slumber, they would pull the oxygen from his nose, and they would let his body naturally die. For my dad, it would be peaceful, and for us, it would be hard to watch. And damn, was it hard to watch. Because my dad, William Homer Dotson, was literally strong-willed to his last breath. He did get drowsy, but his transition was fast. He never asked for sedation medication, and maybe because he didn't know it was happening, we didn't know it was happening, but most likely because he was going to do things on his own terms. It's just who he was, even up to death. He was going to have that final say-so, and I wouldn't expect any less from him. Just to give you a glimpse into the room during the final hour and 15 minutes, specifically those last 20 minutes, it was not peaceful at first. In fact, it was awful. Chaotic, and scary, and unsettling, disturbing, commotion, his diaphragm working overtime to make him breathe, watching his body fight, not to die, but to live, because we are wired to live. And watching the nurse try her hardest to settle his reactions with numerous vials that she quickly shot into his IV. She was chasing him down. The medicine was following him, but he was running the show. Moments before he passed, he weakly reached his hand up. We weren't sure what he was about to do at first, but what he did next moved us all to tears, including the nursing staff that were now watching from the back of the room. He reached up, one hand up to his right ear, and he removed the oxygen tube from around it. And then he slowly reached up to the left ear. He tugged at the tube, but he was too weak and disoriented. I could see he was trying to remove it, and I said, "You want it off, Dad?" And with no expression on his face, I could barely see him nod yes. "Here, I got it," I said, and I pulled it off his ear. And then he reached up, and he removed the oxygen tube from his nose. Who does that? My dad. My dad does that. Stubbornness or strong will or whatever you want to call it, my dad made his own decision. He knew the oxygen was prolonging the dying experience. And he didn't need us to pull the oxygen from his nose because he could do it his damn self. And I believe he was letting us know, I'm done. It was the most beautiful moment in the midst of our hearts breaking, and I wish I could say, and then he slowly drifted off into his final slumber peacefully, but not quite yet. Shortly after he removed the oxygen, he tried to sit up. Some may say he wasn't aware at this point, but I saw his eyes. He had one last moment of panic. He could not breathe, and he wanted to sit up, and through what was left of his shallow breath, he mumbled, "I need to sit up." And with one hand behind his head and one hand on his chest, I gently pushed him back against the bed, and I said, "Daddy, it's okay. We're all here with you. Let go." And he did. He let go. He stepped over the threshold. He broke through the veil. It was the ultimate lean in. And peace flooded the room, the peace that passes all our understanding, peace that makes no sense, peace that you cannot explain with words, you can only feel it with your heart. One of those you had to be there to get it moments. But my mom and my brothers and I, we felt that on a cellular level. We felt it in our being. And we knew he was at peace because we were immediately all at peace. A little traumatized, but thank God for therapy because we'll be working through that part of it. And here's what I learned. There is no pretty way to die. Death is not pretty. But honestly, neither is birth. And yet we talk about birth of a baby as this glorious, beautiful event. No way. Birth is awful. Chaotic, scary, unsettling, disturbing, commotion, and it's gross. Gross things are happening. Fluids are flying, monitors are beeping, and the body is fighting to bring in life. There is nothing pretty about that. But once that baby has arrived and it takes that first breath, peace. Peace floods the room. Peace that passes all understanding, that makes no sense. Peace that you can't explain with words, you can only feel it with your heart. One of those you had to be there to get it moments. And what was once awful and horrifying, gross, disturbing, chaotic, and scary as hell takes on the image of beauty. What was traumatizing fades like a distant memory, as if that part never happened. And we're left with the illumination of glory. Death is no different than birth. Whether life is coming or going, there is beauty to be found. There's beauty in the full cycle of life. We will truly miss my dad. These past 11 months, although trying, were filled with so many wonderful moments. Those past 11 months softened him, cracked him open so that we could know him more. I learned more about him in those 11 months than I knew about him my whole life. He just wasn't one to talk about himself. I love that the day before he died, my brother Tony was sitting with him that day, and he found out my dad was reading this book series for 20 years, The Dresden Files. There was a summer release of the newest book coming out on July 14. And my dad shared with Tony that he was pissed they weren't going to get to read it because he had waited about 4 or 5 years for this new book. And Tony took it to Twitter in hopes that his tweet and the community retweeting and tagging the author, Jim Butcher, would get Jim's attention and get my dad an advance copy of the book, Peace Talks. And within a few hours, Tony received a message from Jim's associate. Hey Tony, tell your daddy he's in luck. Jim wants to hook him up with both Peace Talks and Battleground, the 2 Dresden Files novels coming out this summer, and I will make it happen. We were all in tears when the message came through, and then Tony told my dad, some of you may have seen those pictures on social media. My dad was elated. I'll be damned, he said, which is equivalent to a backflip for most people. And then a few minutes later, I'll be damned. He could not believe it. My dad clung to that book for the next day and a half, besides talking with some close friends and family, but he made sure to listen to as much of that book as he possibly could. His goal was to finish both books before he passed away. Unfortunately, he only made it to chapter 19 of Peace Talks. The book was playing as he started the transition. He tried to turn the volume down but was disoriented, and I asked what he needed help with, and he said, turn it down a little. Instead, I knew the transition was happening, so I paused the audio, and in silence, I looked at him sleeping, and I started to cry silently. Within what seemed like moments, his eyes quickly opened, and he snapped at me. April, turn it back on. I just wanted you to turn it down a little. Okay, I'll turn it back on. My brothers were laughing hysterically in the room. He was so adamant about listening to these books before his time ran out. And after he passed, the room was silent, only the book audio playing softly. And my mom, brothers, and I huddled around one another and we cried together. That audio was still playing in the background. Honestly, too afraid to turn it off at this point. Jim Butcher's creativity is an extension of him as a human. It was everything we needed in that room with us during those most difficult times. We are grateful for the energy that Jim poured into the books. It not only inspired my dad and our family, but it should inspire the creativity in all of us. A reminder that our work matters far beyond what we could ever imagine. And a reminder that we are touching others in ways we may never know. A reminder that our creativity is a gift that we release, and it will take on a new energy of its own once we part from it. I remember when I was about to turn in my book Pressing Forward for the final time. This was it. No more edits, no more changes, no more critiquing, and I got stuck. I couldn't submit it. What if I miss one misspelled word? Which I did, by the way. What if there's a part that doesn't make sense, or I could tailor it a little better for the reader? What if I forgot something? What if I used the wrong word and diluted a sentence that was supposed to really create an impact? And my publisher said the most profound thing to me. He said, April, Art was never meant to be perfected. It was only ever meant to be abandoned. May my dad's journey be a reminder to us all that we should live while we're living. Or, depending on how you look at it, we should live while we're dying, because we're all dying. We just don't have a diagnosis and a prognosis and medical experts directing our path, reminding us constantly that you're dying. And maybe these moments right here at this funeral home, honoring my dad's life, fully aware of his death, rightfully bring us face to face to where we're all headed at some point or another. It's a moment for a heart check. Are you happy where you are? Are you at odds with someone and you miss them, but you're too stubborn or strong-willed to reach out and work it out? Work it out. Trust me when I tell you, work it out. Do you overthink, catastrophize, and keep yourself limited and stuck? Let this be a reminder. Stop doing that. May we treat our hindrances like art. We're not to be perfected. The hindrances are not to be perfected, only to be abandoned. Over and over and over again. And when we come upon those obstacles that lock us up in terror and make us want to run away, and we will face those obstacles, we surely will, may we feel that fear, not label it as good or bad, not let it stop us, and remember that the freedom we so desperately seek is on the other side of what we fear most. It's not about running away. It's about leaning in. And as I said before, sometimes anxiety is a warning. Oftentimes, it's an invitation. It calls out to us and invites us to go deeper. It wants us to shake off the things that we've attached to our identity that causes us to live our lives as a lie. And it's asking us to stop betraying ourselves, an invitation for abundance, clarity, restoration, fulfillment. It's asking us to peel off the outer layers and step into the fullness of who we really are, just as my dad did at the end of his life. He pressed through fear and anxiety, and he found his truest self. And may these learned lessons always be in the forefront of our minds. Number one, don't spend your time looking backwards. You can't change the past. You can only take the building blocks and create a better future, starting right now, right here in the present. Number two, seek first to understand. Don't miss out on iced coffee. Number three, be fully encouraged that bacon is still bacon, even if your taste buds burn off. And number four, call those you love out of corners, no corner dwellers in your life. Number five, no experience is ever void. Your hard times are not lost. Number six, watch for the hummingbirds and the messages that they bring. And number seven, keep pressing forward. And number eight, remember freedom lies on the other side of what you fear most. May we all continue to take the leaps just as my dad did, busting through brick walls, until we take our ultimate leap. Keep leaning in.